Hello, and welcome to another episode of tutorials for World of Warcraft in our World of Warcraft tutorials series. I believe this is episode 2. Let's go ahead and, let's start the game. If you remember how, we can go to the launcher here and hit the play button, and that should launch our game for us. Simple enough. So here we have the login screen again. If you recall, last episode we made a character, our first character. And we did it over on the Aegwin server, right? Yeah. We made Poop, a level 1 human warrior. And so I think today we're going to dive into the menu option. So in the bottom left hand corner of this screen, there's a menu button. If you click on that, you'll get a pop-up. This has 5 different options, and we'll just go bottom to top. So let's take a look at the close button. Because if you hit on that, if you hit right on it, it'll close that window, right? So we can open it right back up. Next up, it's the exit game option. And so if we hit that, it'll close the game, and so we'll have to start it again. So we'll go ahead and we'll start the game again. Now the game has started. We're back at our character selection screen. So let's go back to our Aegwin realm, because that's where we want to be. When we go back in the menus here, we have a cinematics option. And from here you can see that from every expansion, beginning with just the original World of Warcraft, we can view various cinematics from that era of the game, right? So if we were to click on the World of Warcraft option, it would go to a cinematic. So we can see the cinematic for that. But we're not going to do that, because I'll leave the surprise up to you. The big reveals there as you progress through your life of World of Warcraft. Um, so we have World of Warcraft, the Burning Crusade, which that was the second, or the first expansion rather. Um, and then we have some other things here too. We have the Wrath of the Lich King, which is about the Lich King and his wrath. That was the second expansion. Next, we have Cataclysm. Cataclysm is about a big dragon, um, and he breathed fire all over the world, and it got all split up and stuff. They called it the Great Sundering, if you will. And that's probably what the community's favorite expansion is, from what I gather. A lot of cool things happened in there. Um, you'll have to check it out. Then we have Mists of Pandaria. Now this was about some mists on the continent of Pandaria. Um, Pandaren live on Pandaria, and they're kind of like pandas, except they can walk, and they can do kung fu kind of stuff. Um, as well, they could do a lot of other things too. You don't just have to be a monk, but that's where the monks came into play, right? But you could be a panda and be a mage. And if you recall, if we were to close out of that and go to create new character, there's the Pandaren as a neutral race option, right? Yeah. So you could be a male or a female. You could be a warrior, a hunter, a rogue, a priest, a shaman, a mage, a monk, or a death knight. Um, so if we went back into our cinematics, the next expansion was Warlords of Draenor. Now I believe this is the community's favorite expansion. A lot of cool things happened in that expansion. You had a garrison that you could hang out in, kind of like your own little town, and you spent most of your time in there. And people really liked, they enjoyed that. And there was a lot of bad orcs and some good orcs too. Um, some warlords, and we went to Draenor. And Draenor is the same thing as the Burning Crusade, except Draenor was it was before the Burning Crusade, but it came out after the Burning Crusade. Next was Legion, and that involved a lot of green demons, a lot of fell magic, um, and that one wasn't that great. A lot of people didn't really like that one. Battle for Azeroth is what I think. I think it's the community's favorite expansion. That's the one we're currently on right now. Um, a lot of accolades from this expansion. That's coming to a close soon. We have Shadowlands coming up soon. Um, but the quality of the cinematics are good, so you should watch them. And you can have a show subtitles option here too, to if you want to read subtitles. Going back into our menus option, there's the credits. You can click on that, and we can watch the credits. Um, looks like you can go back to Legion's credits, and you can also go in reverse, pause it, play it, or fast forward. And if we were to go back to Legion credits, we would then have the option to jump forward to Battle for Azeroth credits, or go back further to the Warlords of Draenor credits. And again, we have those same control buttons. If you go back to Warlords, you can go back to Mists of Pandaria or forward to Legion. If you go back to Mists of Pandaria, you can go forward to Warlords of Draenor or back to Cataclysm. And then if you go to Cataclysm, you can go back to the Wrath of the Lich King or forward to Mists of Pandaria. And you could go back from Wrath of the Lich King to the Burning Crusade or forward to the Cataclysm credits. And back from the Burning Crusade, you could go to the original World of Warcraft credits or forward to the Wrath of the Lich King credits. And then finally, back at the World of Warcraft credits, the original, you could jump forward to the Burning Crusade credits if you wanted. Um, if you hit the escape button, you could get out of the cinematics. Now let's take a look at the system option here. This kind of might be overwhelming to some because we just have just this plethora of options in the system menu, right? So on the left hand side, we have graphics, advanced, network, languages, and sound. Now, if we went to the graphics section, on this bottom left hand side, you can see there's a recommended option. Clicking on that will ask you if you want to apply the recommended options and reset all the settings to their defaults. You could do it for all your settings, only these settings, meaning just the graphics, or you could cancel. I'm going to cancel. Now, in the display section of this menu, we have a display mode. And this is, you can set the game to run in windowed or full screen, right? So that's windowed mode right there. And then we could go back to full screen mode right here. So that's pretty good. Um, we like that. We like it a lot. So if um, if if we went back to full screen, then we could go back to full screen, which is what I'm attempting to do here. So, and we're back to full screen now. Um, so if we go back into the menu options here, we can see that there is a window size. If you like, if you like window sizes, you could change. These are my three options. I prefer 1920 by 1080, or 1080p as it's known. And then you can change the resolution scale, and this changes the resolution for rendering the 3D world in the game. So you could go all the way down to like a 640 by 360 if you want, or a 33% if you will, and you could go all the way up to 3840 by 2160. I think this is what the people refer to as 4K resolution. It might not be, um, and so you have a monitor option. You can change which display you want to be coming off of, right? So primary or your first monitor. Um, Anti-aliasing, and I know some people are just going to want to go to alias as like an alternate name for something, and so this to them might read that an anti-alternate name, and that might confuse some people. But it's actually a technique to smooth out jaggy edges, especially at low resolutions. But it can result in a slightly blurred image. If you enable it, your computer might run a little worse, and so it could reduce your performance of your game. So you be cautious when using anti-aliasing. You have a variety of different options here. Um, so it's going to be different depending on your hardware. So you're just going to want to play around with what option you like best. Lots of A's in there. Vertical sync synchronizes your frame rate to some fraction of your monitor's refresh rate. And so you want to enable this if you see excessive screen tearing in the game. So you can disable that one or enable it. Going down here in the base settings, we have our graphics quality. It's just a little slider option. So you could go all the way down to 1 if you want to just bring everything below that into the bare minimum. Or you can maximize it on the other end to a 10 and just put everything on ultra and high settings, right? And I like mine about a 7. That's what it recommends for me and my hardware. And I could get a nice, solid, stable frame rate, and the visuals all look real nice there. Um, so you have your texture resolutions. These are the resolution of your textures, and then texture filtering. So you could improve or deprove the the quality of what the textures, how sharp they are, you know. And then there's projected textures. So that's going to project the textures onto things, and you can either disable that or enable that. Below that is the environment. You can turn up or down your view distance slider here. So if you went all the way down, you wouldn't be able to see that far in the game. But if you went all the way up, you could see as far as you could see in the game. Then environment detail is the control for the detail of the environment. Um, it's so there's going to be objects in the game, like there's going to be things that appear, things that you can interact with in the game, or things that just are objects and not just textures. And So those will show up depending on the detail slider. Um, the ground clutter, it controls the density and the distance at which you can see which the ground clutter items like the grass and the foliage are placed. Shadow quality. If you want to have better looking shadows, less blurry shadows, you can improve that to have more sharp, accurate shadows. You have, a variety of settings here, low up to ultra high. Liquid detail. If you want really good looking water or liquids in the game, then you're going to want to put that on a high setting. If you don't really care about that and you're fine with just a blob to represent a liquid, you can go to low. Sun shafts. So there's sun shafts in the game and glare effects, and so that's what that is. Particle density. It can control the number of particles used in the game. So your spells and fire and magic effects, things like that, are going to have particles. So you can have more of those particles in place, showing up all the time and really improve the detail there if you put that on a higher setting. If you don't really care about that, you can put it on a low setting. Sasau, it controls the rendering quality of the advanced lighting effects. So again, if you're really into nice lighting, you're going to want to have Sasau up high. Um, Depth effects. It controls the rendering of depth-based particle effects, and so if you have that higher, it's gonna be better. Outline. Some of the things in the game are outlined, and you can say what those are in a different options menu, but this will have the outline mode if it's good, high, or disabled for that. There's an apply button. Any of the changes you make here, you're going to want to apply if you want them to take effect. Right here is reset user options. So you could reset all your user options, and that will take effect next time you log into the game. So that wraps it up for the graphics section. So going on to advanced here, we have a triple buffering. So it evens out your frame rate spikes, and it might slightly increase input latency or on slower GPUs. I have mine enabled. The MISA, or the MSAA, is the multi-sampling anti-aliasing. So we talked a little bit about anti-aliasing before. This is if you had multiple samples of anti-aliasing. I don't have that on, but there is a color 2x, color 4x, or a color 8x option with more depth as well. So you're going to want to play around with that. Multi-sample alpha testing. It evaluates alpha test operations at sample frequency rather than pixel frequency when the MSAA is enabled. I don't have MSAA enabled, but I do have this alpha test enabled. I'm going to disable that. Then there's post-process AA, post-process anti-aliasing. More on that anti-aliasing, right? So this sets the post-process anti-aliasing mode. And you have the FXAA low, FXAA high, or CMAA. I have none. Resampling quality. When using a render scale that is not 100%, this adjusts the quality of the filter to display resolution. And now if you recall back in our graphics, um, there's a resolution scale. So if you change that, I believe that you'll want to change the resampling quality too. So mine's already at 100%, so I don't need to change that, but you could have a bilinear or bicubic. Bilinear would be 2 lines, and then bicubic would be 2 cubes. Graphics API, most modern PCs, they run on DirectX 12 now. You could go back into DirectX 11 or DirectX Legacy 11 if you wanted. But I'm going to stay at 12. Physics interactions. This is things like When you interact with physics, you could have it be for none, for the player only, or the player and the NPC. And it requires a restart if you change it. Graphics card, you can have it be auto detect. That's, the recommended setting, or you could specify what graphics card you want to have the game run off of. And then you have your max foreground frames per second and your max background frames per second. You can increase this to whatever you want. Maybe we'll go up to a hot 200. And then the max background, maybe we'll drop that down to a hot 8. Just to give us a nice contrast between, you know, ends of the spectrum there. Speaking of contrast, mine's at 50. And then your brightness, mine's also at 50. And then the gamma. So if I went and mess with the gamma, I could go really, really dark to where I can't see anything. Or, it's kind of like if I was in the shadows in the closet or something, or in a dark cave with no light at nighttime. And then it could come up here and it's a really bright day. Um, I think this looks bad. I'm not gonna have that setting up there. I'm gonna just put mine back in the middle, 1.6, and that to me looks comfortable. Um, so that wraps up the advanced panel. So if we go to network, we have three different options here. We can optimize network for speed. So if you enable this option, it optimizes your network usage for speed in order to decrease lag. It increases your bandwidth usage, um, so make sure you take that into consideration. Enable IPv6 when available. IPv6 is the technology behind the next generation internet. It requires IPv6 connectivity to the internet. If you check that without having that, it can prevent you from playing WoW. So you're gonna want to check your IP internet provider, ISP, internet service provider. IP is the intellectual property. Before you mess with this option, if you turn it on and you can't play, and then you realize that you turned it on, you can just turn it off and you can probably play again. Advanced combat logging, it writes extra logging data to the combat log to a text file. It can cause more network use when you're using the combat log chat command. So a little caution there. In languages, you can change the text language from English to Espanol or Portuguese. I speak English, so I'm going to have mine be English, and then the audio is English as well. This might differ from location to location. I don't have other versions of Warcraft available to me. I just have the American or the English version. So we're going to just stick with that. Under sound, you can enable the sound or disable the sound. Maybe if you don't like the sound, you can disable it. And if you do like the sound, you can enable it. And then you have a playback panel here. So we have sound effects. You can check that or uncheck that. If you uncheck it, the nested items underneath it will be grayed out and become deactivated. But if you check it, you'll see that they light up. So you have sound effects, pet sound effects. Pet Sounds it's an album by the Beach Boys, but I think this is talking about if you're a hunter or a warlock, then they make sounds as pets. Um, so if you like that, you should turn that on. There's emote sounds. You can do emotes in the game, and we'll probably do another separate video just going over emotes in the game and show those off. But some of them are they're pretty humorous. We have a variety of jokes, some train noises, things like that. So we'll get into that later. Music, you can enable the background music. If you want that music to loop continuously, you can check loop music. And then there's pet battle music. So pet battles, there's a system in the game that's kind of like the popular game Pokemon, um, where you can battle with pets on a turn-based system. A lot of people enjoy that. The pet battle music can be pretty intense for some, so a little caution there. Um, Probably for the younger crowd too. When they'll they'll be playing the game, so a little caution. Ambient sounds. If you like the ambient sounds of the environments, like little birds chirping or crickets or critters scurrying about, or just weird environmental sounds, the ambient sounds checkbox is for you. There's a dialogue box, so you can enable or disable all dialogue. And then there's error speech. So error speech is when your character says like I'm out of range, or I'm low on mana, or I can't cast that spell yet. A variety of those kind of things that if you spam keys a lot and you don't like hearing that all the time, you can uncheck that. But if you do like hearing that, you can check it. There's sound and background. What this means, not to be confused with like background music or background sound. Sound and background is when your game is in the background. Say you alt tab, you go to check, your social media feed or your email, or if you want to look up something, or maybe watch a little bit of a video or something like that. Sound and background is useful for being able to hear the game still while you're out of the game, if that makes a little sense to you. Um, I know I've been victim of not having that checked, and then maybe I'll queue for a dungeon or a battleground or something. I'll tab. I won't hear the sound of the queue popping and that it's ready for me, and then I'll miss it, and then I'll get very angry. So typically, sound and background's a great idea to have. Enable reverb is if you want to enable the reverb, you can check that. And then there's distance filtering, which it simulates real world audio environment by reducing audio frequency over a distance. Um, to me, this reads like if I'm farther away from something, I'm going to hear less of it, right? Just like in real life. So in the hardware section, we have game sound output. These are my three different options. I can use my headphones or my speakers or my other speakers. Choose whichever one you prefer. Sound channel, you can have a higher quality sound channel, 64 down to 48, or lowest of the 24. And the sound cache is how much memory from your system is reserved for sound. So you could have smaller or double that with large at 128 MB, or megabytes if you will. In the volume section, we have a slider for the master volume, 0 to 100%, or anywhere between. Choose whichever you're comfortable with there. And then we have separate sliders for the sound effects in the game, things like swords clashing or blocks from shields or any kind of sound really. And then we have a music. So this is for the background music in the game, not to be confused with sound and background, but actual background music. And so you can adjust that as you please. The ambience, or ambiance, however you choose to pronounce it, you can adjust that as well. We talked about that a little bit before with the ambient sounds there. So if unless you have ambient sounds checked, this isn't really going to make a big difference. Dialogue, adjusts the dialogue sound when people are talking in the game, or if you have that error speech dialogue checked, it can you can change how loud that is for you. And then finally, we have an OK button and a cancel button. If you mess with the settings and you're not quite sure if this is a good idea, you can cancel at any time, or you could commit to it and say OK. Um, and I believe that about wraps up our game menu option. And so I'll leave the video at that for you. Um, and until next time, I hope you have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative. I really look forward to diving into our next topic, um, and then maybe eventually start poking around in the game itself. Uh, but until then, that's all I have. And so I hope you go out today and have a good day. Um, Thank you for being here, and